If you had walked into the lantern room that night, you would have felt it in your chest before you knew what it was, that tight quiet after a glass hits marble and shatters the vibe, and everyone pretends they didn't hear it. And then Grant Mercer, the man on the magazine covers the name on the door, cut through the dining room like weather in $1,000 suit, eyes locked on a kid with a dustpan who couldn't have been more than 22. "Do you see what you just did?" he snapped. "Not even a question. That bottle costs more than your rent. You're done here." And the kid. Eddie tried to say he'd pay for it with money he obviously didn't have, while my little girl Lila, still wearing a paper crown from the dessert cart, squeezed my hand like it was the only solid thing in the room. We had saved for months for that window booth. Harbor lights like diamonds, one night a year that feels like a movie. And in the space where the piano player lifted his hands off the keys and nobody breathed. I stood up, not dramatic, just a mom who was tired of watching people get steamrolled, and said, calm and level, "He dropped a glass, not a person. Maybe don't ruin his week." Grant turned slow, that shark smile fixed in place, and when his eyes found the view behind me, he smiled for real, like he'd spotted a prize there. "We go, this is my table," he said. And I said, "It's our table tonight, we booked it." And he stepped closer, like the floor was his. "I think you're misunderstanding how this works. I own this place. When I say I need a table, people move." And I told him what I knew was true. "It's my daughter's birthday. We're not moving." You could feel the staff pull back into the shadows. Ms. Park, the manager, slid in behind him like a safety net. The security guard hovered in the doorway like a question. Phones came up around the room, pretending to scroll, and Lila looked up at me with frosting on her lip and whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" So I kept my eyes on him and said, "Baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Some grown-ups forget how to act in public," and his laugh fell a few degrees colder. "You have no idea who you're talking to," and I said, "A man with a lot of money and not nearly enough practice saying please." And he lifted his phone like it was a gavel. Security removed them, and the guard didn't move because even he could see this was about to be a bad look. So I put my palm on my kid's back and said, "The one true thing left. We're finishing a birthday dinner. We're not causing trouble." That's when Lila, all 5 years old and brave, tilted her head and asked him, "Are you sad?" And I swear to you, it hit him like a wave. He didn't see coming, just washed the bluster off his face for half a beat before he grabbed for it again. "Ridiculous. You're banned from all Mercer Group restaurants, effective immediately." And I said, "Go ahead, ban a 5-year-old on her birthday show. Everyone, what kind of boss you are." The cameras are already rolling, and I didn't mean it as a threat. It was just true. And then the twist. You don't plan showed up because life loves timing. Lila's smile faded, fingers pressed to her chest, and I heard that thin wheeze I know better than my own heartbeat. I shifted without thinking. Night shift nurse mode switching on like a light. "Okay, baby. Deep breath, slow and steady. We've done this." Shake the inhaler, seat, the spacer coach, the count, watch the color, feel her ribs. Hear the whistle flatten into breath again, and the entire room, even the kitchen with the timers still beeping, held still for a little girl trying to breathe. And when her body settled and she said, "I'm okay," I looked up and found Grant staring at the inhaler like it was a mirror. "Does she need an ambulance?" he asked, voice smaller. And I said, "No, she's okay. This happens when she's excited or scared." And he said, almost to himself, "I'll get your car, my driver's outside. He'll take you wherever you need to go." And pride tried to rise up, but my hand was on my kid's back, and that decided it. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. And then he turned to Eddie and did the first human thing I'd seen him do. "You're not fired. Everyone makes mistakes." And Ms. Park's hands shook as she boxed our cake, and Miles, the driver with the kind voice, pulled the car around, and we slid out into the harbor night that looked like 1,000 tiny yeses. I didn't ride home feeling triumphant. I rode home shaky and mad and weirdly grateful. Got my kid into rocket pajamas, ate leftover cake on the couch, and sat in the quiet, thinking about power. The kind that throws its weight around and the kind that lifts a chin and counts to 10. You know what I mean. I didn't see what Grant did, but the next afternoon, the hospital was buzzing, and pharmacy handed me Lila's meds with a zero balance. And the tech said, "Looks like you've got help now," and upstairs, the nurses were gossiping about a donation to pediatric respiratory that didn't look like PR because it came with a fund for families and rules that said no banner, no photo op, just make sure the kids get what they need. And I didn't cry in pharmacy because I hate crying, somewhere that smells like alcohol swabs. I cried in the parking garage where nobody pretends not to see you. A week later, a letter arrived on thick paper, no logo, just his handwriting, no excuse, no perfume on the mess. I acted like a bully. "I'm sorry, I'm trying to change if you allow it." I'd like to apologize to Lila in person, and I tucked it in my wallet and waited to see if the change had bones, because talk is cheap, and I'm not an extra in anybody's redemption arc. Word started moving through our city's restaurant family. Raises, paid sick days, real insurance training that didn't sound like a punishment. And that's when I believed it, not when a check cleared, but when Eddie showed up at our table 2 weeks later and grinned like a person with a future. We were in the clinic waiting room with a coloring book when a shadow blocked the light. And there he was, no entourage, just Miles pretending to study a flu shot poster. And Grant said, "I'm not here to make a scene, I just wanted to apologize the right way." And Lila, God bless her, said, "You're the man who was sad." I got a better inhaler now, and he crouched, expensive suit creasing, without a flinch. "I'm glad you were very brave." And she asked, "Are you less sad today?" And he took a breath and said, "A little less, yes." And she nodded and went back to coloring, and I watched him watch her and felt one old defense loosen by one notch, not all the way, just enough to let fresh air in. He didn't disappear after that. He didn't hover either. He apologized to Ms. Park and Eddie in front of the staff, not some grand speech, just a plain, "I was wrong, I'm changing," and the room let out a breath. It had been holding for years. He went to Lila's kindergarten play and clapped like a fool. He learned to assemble a nebulizer without swearing under his breath. He picked raspberry swirl at the neighborhood ice cream shop. After my 5-year-old told him vanilla was a crime against joy. And on a quiet night at the lantern room, the harbor lights bounced like sequins, and a small folder landed on our table with neat handwriting that said, "Table 12 is yours whenever you want it. No charge, no conditions." And I sat there with my hand on that card and understood something I wish I'd learned sooner, that power can be used to pull chairs out for people who never get offered a seat. The twist in the middle of the story was never the money, it was the question. A 5-year-old asking a man built out of hardness if he was sad, and him answering without saying the word, then changing the only way that counts, when no one is filming. Yeah, that happened. The win you're probably waiting for came a little later, and not with trumpets, just him sliding a simple announcement across the table. The Lila Grace Fund is live preventive meds and emergency equipment for kids in this county, for as long as my restaurants have breathing room named after a brave girl who asked me a simple question and didn't let me off the hook, and Lila asking if she could pick the logo, and him saying yes to a rocket, like it was a business plan. And I won't lie, my throat went tight, because relief can feel like a wave you forgot how to ride. If this were a movie, we'd cut to a ring under candlelight and a kiss in front of the harbor. But life stays messier. 3 days after that dinner, someone posted the whole birthday video, and the internet did what it does. Half the comments called it a redemption arc, half called it calculated PR. People argued about whether money cleans a mess or just perfumes it, whether a man who broke things is allowed to help fix them. And at 2 a.m. on my break, I did something. I never do, I posted. I'm the mom in the video. This is not a defense of cruelty. It's a witness statement. A man acted like a tyrant, then apologized without excuse, then changed the way his people are treated and put his money where my kids' lungs are. You don't have to forgive him. I didn't for a while, but I watched him show up in the quiet, and I believe what people do when nobody claps. Where we are now is ordinary brave, which is the only kind that lasts. We carry an emergency inhaler to the park and an extra spacer in my purse. We sit at table 12 sometimes, and sometimes we don't. Eddie is saving for grad school. Ms. Park looks 10 years younger. Miles sneaks Lila extra cherries on Sundays like it's a secret ritual, and Grant has learned that 5-year-olds do not care about your net worth if you can't cut the crust off a sandwich in one smooth line. And I am learning that letting people help isn't surrender, it's strategy. When the person you're protecting is small and has lungs that sometimes forget the steps. I don't know how this ends, and I'm not asking you to write a fairy tale for me. I'm asking something harder. What do you think justice looks like here? Can people with too much power really change? Or are we just suckers for a good apology? If someone used their money and their signature to undo harm, would you save them a seat at your table or say thanks for the fund and keep your distance? Tell me what right looks like to you down in the comments. Push back if you need to share the time. You stood up for a worker or someone stood up for you, and if you believe dignity shouldn't depend on a bank account, hit like, subscribe, and send this to someone who needs a reminder that kindness, used right, is stronger than fear.